Hello and welcome to the Open Era Podcast. My name is Devang Desai and I'm joined as always by Mr. Simon Bushell in his finest tuxedo because yes, it's time. The Open Era year-end awards are here.
The Open Era Year-End Awards Spectacular 2022, to give it its full name, Devang. You're selling us short here.
Sorry.
Well, this year we have a absolute bumper crop of things to get through. Like a metric shit ton of things to try and get through in terms of the things that have happened off the court, on the court, and as we will get onto, the Parting Shots Award, which you will find some very strange things in part 3, but we'll come on to that shortly, Dev. So a lot happened during the course of 2022. This is going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but we're going to try and get our way through, Dev. Sound good so far? You with us?
Sounds good to me. I'm ready to go.
So where else to start other than off the court and the off the court awards? And we've broken them down into a bunch of different sections, but we're going to start this one and kick this off in the only way that we know how, with the Biggest Diplomatic Incident Award, which has 3 nominees this year. The first of which is Novak Djokovic being banned from the Australian Open. The second of which is Russian and Belarusian players being banned from Wimbledon. And the third is the WTA China and the ongoing case of Peng Shuai. Where should we start with this, Dev? And let's do this in this way. What would you lean towards as your award winner? And let's see if it lines up with the pair of us to start with.
I really wanted to pick the Novak ban because I thought at the time it was just totally surreal and tough to comprehend. But the winner for me is the Wimbledon ban, Bush. I think the decision by the All England Club to literally remove players from Russia and Belarus and then also not award points for the tournament, in hindsight being a massive impact on a bunch of people, right? As we got to the end of the year, the Wimbledon ban was massive, I thought. And as much as the WTA has talked tough with China, it seems like that is easing as well. And Peng Shuai is fading back, maybe behind the scenes and no longer in the forefront of our minds. And that's on us. I want to say the Wimbledon ban had the biggest impact, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to know what we would define as the parameters of this award in terms of biggest impact on the sport, perhaps, biggest impact geopolitically in the world, or just amount of headlines written, because you would say that probably Novak Djokovic led the last one, or the latter category, with amount of newspaper columns and comments made around the world, because lest we forget, back to January, it was the talk of the town, was it not, to have the world number 1 and defending champion and defending everything going into Australia. Then to have him barred at the border, it seems like a different lifetime ago.
100%, and he's coming back, right? He's ready to go. He's going to play in 2023, and all is forgiven, and he's probably going to win the tournament. So what did we learn from this, really?
Oh, we learned nothing, didn't we? So you're...
As usual. As usual.
He definitely learned nothing. That's one thing we know for certain.
I do think the WTA basically softening and saying, we could return to China next year, and I think the plan is to return to China for the two-red finals. That was a tough blow. And I understand the economics at play and the other factors as well, Bush, but I thought their initial stand was so powerful and commendable, and unfortunately we've seen that kind of erode.
Yeah, this is a tricky one. Just from the language that we use to say the Biggest Diplomatic Incident Award in tennis, I think I'll give it to the WTA China and Peng Shuai, just simply because you had a tour basically banning an entire state from tournaments being there, which is something that we've obviously seen in our sport previously, but to have it happen in 2022, I think is a big deal. The Wimbledon one is a really tricky one as well, because of just how, not out of left field it was, but I think how much we on this podcast disagree with it as an action as well. I don't know. It's a tough call. I think we can put Djokovic to one side and say that, yes, as though that was a diplomatic incident, but it was more on an individual level as opposed to something at state level. So if you want to take Wimbledon and I take China, it feels like we somewhat balance out in the middle, is it not?
Yeah, we covered it off. Good job.
Indeed so. Let's move on to some lighter moments, or let's actually continue with the worst, because let's try and end this segment on a positive as opposed to go in the opposite direction. So let's go worst next. Worst moment of the year off the court. So where there's a lot to choose from, but I've narrowed it down to 3 areas. The first of which is the continued and deafening silence around Alexander Zverev, who has still, to this day, not been charged, or nothing has been laid against him by the ATP and powers that be. The second one is the continued aspect of turfdom within tennis and the, I would say, poorness of the sport to support trans athletes in that regard, to have some of its senior figures coming out and not having great opinions on that. And I see that you've added Stefanos Tsitsipas the moron as the third one here in the worst moment.
A late shout. He just made it in to the award process. I cleared it with the officials, but he made it in.
The powers that be. So Stefanos goes up against turfdom and domestic violence abuse within the
In that context, it sounds quite off and not probably fair to put him in here. But something needs to be said about someone basically copying and pasting their whole personality. Someone needs to call this out, Simon. If not us, who?
An absolute late shocker into this category. Was not expected. I think Steph may make another appearance later on in these award segments. So, but I agree with you. Like, just some of the things he said across the year, I think we both want to like him. And I think in general, we want to believe there is good inside of that luscious head of golden retriever hair. But it does not seem like it's trending in the right direction, just given some of his latest comments about feminism and the things that go on around that. So let's perhaps attack the silence over Alexander Zverev, Dev, because I think this is a fairly easy moment for me to say that I think it's the worst moment in tennis this year, because tennis continues to embarrass itself in this regard.
And it's interesting. I mean, the wider tennis world rushed to his aid when he suffered that horrific injury at the French Open against Rafa, and it was well wishes, and I hope he gets back soon. And obviously, I don't think wishing injury on anyone is our goal here at all. And I totally understand people empathizing with him in that moment, but I did think it kind of maybe removed some of the glare from him in that regard, and that's unfortunate to me. And I think as much as the ATP is pseudo addressed this and not really, and kind of announced some new initiatives and goals, they really haven't done anything, and no one around tennis has either, and that includes some of the game's vanguards and their sponsors and their representation. So I think Zverev might be the winner here, but the ongoing turfdom in tennis, I think, is something that was impossible to ignore this year, and upsetting in very, very many ways.
Yeah, I think just everything you said, I agree with. But in regards to the ongoing situation around domestic violence and accusations of that within our sport, I think is a good time to reflect at the end of the year to see how little really has changed in that regard. I think they've done a acceptable PR job to try and cover this up in terms of them trying to cover their own asses. But in terms of actually doing anything to protect players or to protect the young women or young men in some regards of these actions that happen to them, I think it's a joke, and I think it continues to remain laughable in that regard. And I think it's a deserving winner of worst moment of the year or worst moments of 2022. So congratulations to tennis in that regard.
It's well said. I mean, Martina Navratilova is everywhere, right? She's one of the people in this game that is the most respected, and obviously what she's done on the court, but also a trailblazer off of it. So I think that's why it's been so disheartening, I think, to see, Simon, because this is someone who has broken so many barriers herself. And when it comes to this issue, she's either unwilling or ignorant to a point where it's totally off-putting, and it's completely changed how I view her, at least. I don't know about you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with you. It's not a good look. And it's not just about a PR perspective here of it, it's not good vibes, it's not a good look. I think it goes much further than that, because this causes actual harm to a minority and a group of people that are so
who are trying to live. People who are trying to live
exactly,
and are already subject to so many challenging things in their lives, their day-to-day lives, that to pile on and to add your voice in that way, not having it.
So there you go, Steph. You did well this year, but you couldn't quite edge out those two of the nominees for worst moments of the year. Let's move on to biggest shocker. Two possible incidents, moments that happened during the course of this year, Devang. I will ask you, which would you pick was the biggest shocker? Simona Halep testing positive, or Ashley Barty retiring?
This is tough because I honestly, and my feelings on Patrick Mouratoglou are well known, but I don't trust this guy that much. So whenever he was linked to any player, my spidey senses go off, Bush. But I could not have predicted a positive test for Simona Halep, whereas I don't think Ash Barty's been shy about liking things beyond tennis or wanting to find new ways to live or new avenues for her life off the court. I think the timing was a bit surprising considering her age, but Simona Halep testing positive and basically being banished from the sport, and then the subsequent fallout and the way some people have stood by her, including Darren Cahill and Mouratoglou, and then some people not. It's a massive moment. This is someone, Simon, who was a leader on the WTA, someone that we liked a bit, quite a lot actually, in terms of not only her play style, but like the way she handled herself off the court and recommending people get vaccinated and all these other things. So to see this happen was a bit of a jolt.
I feel like that's the most lukewarm thing that anyone's ever said about us.
We like her a bit. We like her a bit.
Quite a bit, yeah. She seems all right. Oh, dear. It's interesting you went in that direction because I would have, for all the money in the world, would have thought you would have gone with Ashley Barty retiring as the biggest shocker, simply because you had the world number one hanging a racket up at a time coming off a Grand Slam victory and someone who was at the pinnacle of the sport, and I think who was set to dominate for a very long time, who didn't really have a clear-cut rival that she was going up against. And yes, Simona Halep is a big name within the sport, but it's not like we haven't had athletes at the top end of either the WTA or the ATP banned for drugs in the sport either. And I think if you've been around the sport long enough, he steps very, very carefully around this one to say that there is some very dodgy things when it comes to the taking of performance-enhancing drugs or whether or not the transparency is there within the sport in general. So, yes, I think what we said on the podcast, I think, still holds true, which is that we weren't surprised that someone was busted for this. I think we were surprised that it was Simona Halep. But if you're asking me, I would have gone with Ashley Barty retiring as the biggest shocker.
It's definitely a fair shout. I think also why I'm not picking Barty Bush is because I'm on the record. She's not retiring for long, and she'll be back very soon. So I don't think it does have that same impact for me, even though literally the game's top player walked away at the top of the game and kind of not robbed us, but took away maybe the opportunity to watch her play Iga Swiatek a bunch of times at the biggest tournaments around the world. I really, really would have enjoyed seeing that, but Ash Barty's her own person, and I respect that immensely. That being said, I think she'll be back, man. She's coming back soon.
As is Serena Williams as well, and you called that
exactly.
one.
Exactly.
So we don't need to worry about that.
How many posts about practicing can you see before realizing that this is definitely happening?
I don't want you to be right, but at the same time, I kind of do want you to be right. It's that weird sort of big brother energy where you don't want your brother to do well, but at the same time, you kind of do. That's kind of how I feel at the moment with you, Dev. Damn it! Don't be right on this one.
I respect it. I will say though, just to maybe sum up this round of awards, Bush, it was a really interesting, for lack of a better word, year. Like this, there was no shortage of off the court things to talk about. I mean, Judy Murray is going to Saudi Arabia to help lead that EXO in a few weeks. A bunch of players are going there too. The sports washing within tennis is something that I think we kind of just accept as a thing because the sport is awash with sponsors and people paying for something and things that we don't really get a transparent look into. So maybe we just accept it as normal. But man, the sports washing in tennis picked it up a notch in 2022 as well.
Yes, this show brought to you by the state of Qatar, who have invested heavily in this podcast. We
love the World Cup. We're loving it. Yeah.
I think tennis has actually been at the forefront of this in a lot of ways of sport washing. They've done it so well over the years that they've actually written the rule book on how to do this and get away with it effectively, because if you look at the insides of the tour, there is a lot of very dirty money that we really, if we want to follow it to the end point, you get very uncomfortable about the direction of the tour in general and the direction of the money that's involved in the sport. And this year was a continuation of that. I think across those three categories, a lot of bad this year, Dev. Not a lot of good.
But we do have to end on the positive because you've set this up quite well, and we need to uplift our wonderful listeners.
So, out of a raft of actually decent moments and positive moments that we could have chosen, I narrowed it down to two. One that happened fairly recently, and I'd like to get your perspective on which you picked to give the award on most positive moment of 2022 in tennis. Is it the Wimbledon change in terms of the all-white clothing, specifically around women and female players? Or is it the Daria Katsakina announcement earlier in the course of this year? I believe it was in September that announcement came out. Which would you give the award to?
Ooh, I mean, the Wimbledon clothing change, a long time coming, like good for them. But like, honestly, guys, it took you this long. Seriously, I do like the attention that was brought to this issue, and also to women in sport and the other challenges they face on a day-to-day basis that we don't get a glimpse into. There's no health report indicating when someone is not injured in the sport way. Bush, if you know what I'm saying. There's not a shoulder injury or a leg injury. There's other things going on that we don't get a glimpse into, and that affects their performance on the court, and it affects the way people talk about them, and oftentimes talk about them in negative ways. I liked how the attention was brought to this matter, and people understood, yeah, there's a lot of things we don't understand all the time when it comes to these athletes. That being said, I'm going to go with Katsakina. I think she's just a wonderful person. I like her personality a ton, but I think the way she handled this, the braveness she showed, it was classically her, but it was also on such a powerful level, considering the stakes at play, Bush, in terms of Russia and her making this clear publicly. I thought it was amazing to see and just so admirable.
I agree with you entirely. And she also had a dynamite year as well.
She was pretty good on the court.
Absolutely. Career high ranking, getting to the semifinals of the French Open, all the things that's cool to see in that regard, but that's not obviously the biggest moment here. She's quoted as saying that she found living in the closet impossible. Those are her direct quotes. And I think we sit in a country, or both live in a country in Canada, where it's easier, I think, to be part of the queer community. But having said that, the challenges that are still faced worldwide by people who are part of that community in general is astonishing. And it should not be the case at all that just for who you love or who you feel like you are as a human being, you are persecuted, you are talked down to, you are not given the same rights. And I think her coming out and having the voice that she did this year will make a huge amount of difference to a lot of people in the world. So I think that has to be the most positive moment of the year in that regard.
I think that's where I'm leaning as well, Simon. Like it's a massive thing for her, and I think it's a massive thing to be proud of who you are. But what she's done for people who will follow her and youngsters who are watching, I don't think you can measure that. I think it's honestly one of the biggest things to see others like yourself be proud of that and tell the world who they are, and as pure as that is, it's probably maybe the coolest thing as well. So tennis is all cool in that, but as a person, I think she's transcended the sport beyond just picking up a racket.
I agree. And that's probably a good way to leave this opening segment. We did it, Dev. There was a lot of terribleness off the court, and I think the awards reflected that of who we gave them out to.
I wanted to just throw in sports washing 2 more times just to underline how great this year has been off the court.
Oh dear. Let's turn our attentions to the on-the-court awards. Moving on swiftly, there's no such thing as sports washing in tennis. Everything's fine. Don't listen to Devang. And let's turn our attention to on the court. As FIFA say, now it's time for the politics to end. Let's concentrate on the football. So let's concentrate on the tennis in part 2. Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. It is the Open Era Year-End Awards Spectacular 2022. That's right, the off-season is upon us, if there is such a thing as the off-season within tennis. All 17 minutes of the off season are upcoming, and we can look forward to that, Dev, as we get a little bit of a break in that regard. But we're going to turn our attention to on the court and what happened in terms of tennis. We could go in any number of directions. I think the Oscars do it where they do like best actor first or something now, or they do best picture like and last or whatever it is. So let's maybe leave the big ones right to the end of this segment. And let's maybe start with the young players of the season. Starting on the WTA side, I'll give you 3 names. WTA Young Player of the Season, Qing Zhang, Linda Fruhvirtova, and a surprise entry here in Brenda Fruhvirtova as well. Because if you do what she did at the age of 15, I think you deserve a mention in here, in amongst all of the young players who have done so well this season. The only reason that the name Coco Gauff and the only reason that Iga Swiatek don't make this list is because they might be amongst some other categories, Steph, because you got to put the cutoff point at some point, haven't you?
You do. And I mean, I think I'm going to pick Zheng, even though she's 20 here, and the sisters are going to be a force in tennis for a long time. The Czech Republic in general is just on a ridiculous heater in terms of churning out top level tennis players on the women's side, at least. And the Fruhvirtova sisters, I think I'm botching that last name pronunciation, are part of that wave. But I'm going to go with Zheng because I think this is one of those years that you have when you signal, I'm going to be a force on the tour and I'm going to cause a lot of people problems, but also you take like those good losses, Bush, if you know what I mean. And I think she had a couple of those moments where the moment maybe was not too big, but she wasn't consistent enough in the biggest points to beat some players who have been at the top of the game for a long time. That being said, towards the summer, she notched a bunch of big wins, including Jabeur and Andreescu. But then she lost to Pliskova. So you're measuring these things maybe in segments, but overall, I think she's super, like, her personality off the court is really interesting. I love watching her press conferences, and I can't say that for a lot of players, to be honest. So I think that part is very cool. But on the court as well, that match in Toronto against Bianca Bush, I had that down as one of my favorites to watch. Not because maybe the tennis was that exceptional. It was windy as hell, and no one could hold serve at all. But I think it was one of those matches where you learn a lot about the player. And I really bought in to Zheng at that moment. So I'm going to pick her.
I love it. I think that's all fair, and she had an incredible year, and I think she's going to be right up at the top of the sport for a very long time. It's a fascinating question to see how high she can get in the rankings. It would be amazing to see if she actually manages to get to the summit and win a Grand Slam. I'm still not yet convinced that that is the case in the coming season, but we have been proved vastly wrong in some other occasions. I want to just point the attention very briefly at Brenda Fruhvirtova, just to point out a few stats here. So a couple of numbers just to give some meat on this bone. Brenda Fruhvirtova was born in 2007. 2007. Just to give you some flavor.
I don't like that. I feel like I'm fading away literally in real time. Like I'm becoming pixelated and fading into the abyss.
Oh, Jesus. She's ranked 128 in the world. She won eight ITF titles this year. 8 at that level, which is astonishing. She's 8-0 in finals at that level. She went on a 27 match win streak at that level as well to ascend to world number 128. This was all on clay. She did it, admittedly. I think if you turn around to us next year, or you turn around to me and said that in a world, Brenda Fruhvirtova wins the French Open in 2023.
Next year?
I'm...
Put some dollars on that,
It's entirely possible.
No, I'm buying that. Put some dollars on that because I need you to take me to Europe when you cash in on this.
Shall I do that? Shall I actually put some money on this?
I think you should.
I think I have to now, right?
I think you should. Shall we keep going here?
We can. And Linda doesn't get any love here despite having an incredible year. And, 17, she's passed it.
As someone with 2 sisters and and understanding that vibe, I think Linda's used to it. Let's be honest here.
The ATP Young Player of the Season. The award nominees from Open Era are Holger Rune, Lorenzo Musetti, and Jack Draper. There was also some other names that didn't make this, but we left it at 3. Mm-hmm. Where is your award going this year, Devang?
Like, we have to pick Holger Rune. Like, we have to. I'm not going to, but we should pick him because of his meteoric ascent and the fact that by the end of the season, he looked like one of those players that deserved to be there and deserved to be considered among the players to watch in 2023. That being said, I just don't like the kid, so I'm not going to pick him at all, Simon. I'm going to pick Jack Draper. I'm going to pick the model.
Snack Draper,
the GQ man. He reminds me of so many footballers, Bush, that I don't know if it's just being I'm just being, oh, he's English and young, so he reminds me of like Mason Mount, but he does have that disposition of a, like, yeah, I'm good at this, and yeah, it's cool, and like, yeah, I'll go out with my mates if I win this tournament, but like overall, I'm just chuffed to be here. That vibe, I can buy into it. I like Jack Draper. I like his match against Felix at the U.S. Open. I thought was telling. It was indicative of where he could go in terms of what he has in his game and the power he has. So I think it might be the unsexy choice, kind of, because maybe even Musetti has a better shot or better shout here. But I'm going to pick the UK man, Jack Draper.
Yeah, and obviously the answer to this, and the person who will win this award at the ATP ceremony is Holger Rune. He will not win this award because neither of us like him, and it's our show. So in that regard,
this is if you want to come at us, start your own podcast. It's basically what we're saying.
Fair enough.
Is that how you get, Butch? Is that how you get new listeners? Yell at the people currently listening and berate them into starting their own podcast?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's how it works, isn't it? I feel like I remember reading that on some sort of website at some point. I'm picking Musetti here because, I love Musetti. And
I left him for you as well.
Yeah, Rune, you get no love. Maybe you get love later on, but let's move on to the WTA Most Improved Player. I'll give you a list of 3, and there was a bunch of good seasons here. It's actually quite difficult to narrow this down, but WTA Most Improved, and this we talk about this, and this is one of the most competitive fields that we always have conversations about on this podcast. So what do you define most improved? If you go from 3 to 1 in the world rankings, does that have more merit than going from 500 to 200? Those are like immensely fascinating conversations to me. But the 3 that I picked out was Jess Pegula, Ons Jabeur, and Beatrice Haddad-Maia. I think I'm going to give this one to Ons Jabeur just simply because to get to world number 2 and continue to the ascent that she has had and where she's got to, just given her age and everything, I think that means more to me than what Jess Pegula did.
Yeah, this is
God.
I think I back it, and I love Ons Jabeur as well, and I support your decision, Bush. But I think the name of this award is tough, and across all sports. Like, it's not just tennis, where it's like, what does most improved mean? Like, what are you improving off of, right? Like, what was the base, I guess? And I think if you look at Beatrice Haddad-Maia, she definitely improved, and I totally understand. Like, she's basically came all the way back from a doping ban and has reasserted herself as a top 30, top 20 player. And Ons Jabeur added that extra element to her game to get her inside the top 5 and become this level of player. And I'm not just saying this because go Bills and go Buffalo Bills, but it's just Pegula for me, Bush, because overall, nothing flashy at all about her game, yes, but everywhere she's improved. All across in every discipline in tennis and as a part of her game, and include doubles as well, she has improved. She is now a rock solid top 10 player. I don't think I ever had her as that. So I'm going to pick Jess Pegula here.
Tell me how many Grand Slam finals Jess Pegula got to this year?
0. I think that's the answer. I know you're trying to beat me into a corner, but I think it's 0. You know what I'm saying though about improve though, and how it's so vague that it could mean so many different things.
Yes, I think so. Ons Jabeur made 2 Grand Slam finals this year.
Go to the ATP Most Improved, and we'll pick from there, and you'll see exactly what I'm saying. Because the obvious choice here is kind of in the same vein.
Am I about to argue against myself in this list? We should do it.
You are.
ATP Most Improved. Felix Auger-Aliassime, Holger Rune, or Taylor Fritz?
It's Felix, right? It's probably Felix. Like, is Holger Rune the most improved, or is he just actualizing his talent? And like, we've never really seen what the base was, right? I think Felix, across this season, didn't make a slam final, correct?
He did not.
But you saw an arc of improvement that led to that back-to-back tournament success towards the end of the season. So for that reason, I think he's the most improved. And also in that Pegula vein, I think he's the most consistent as well from where he's been, because I don't think consistency was something we necessarily denoted as a hallmark of Felix's game. But this year, especially towards the end, I thought that was.
You're gonna laugh at this. I think I want to give Taylor Fritz this
Taylor
award.
Fritz, yes, yes. The long game played off. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
We did. We eventually got me in that regard. So, I think Felix is the right answer here, isn't it? It has to be, to make the leap that he has done. This is the best part. I mean, these are obviously the good moments because there is legitimately no correct answer here.
There isn't. And I mean, Taylor Fritz, to me, I'm coming back from the injury he had as well. And the fact that he was online as well, kind of basically asking where his name was on some of these urine less. He says he should have been nominated for most improved officially. I think the official nominees were Alcaraz, Cressy, Draper, Rune. He definitely should have been on the official list. Yeah. I don't know how Jack Draper makes that list. What are we talking about? Improve from what? He's just starting.
Big shout out to Maxime Cressy as well. Did not make my list, but was on my short list. If we had 5, he would have made that list. So fair play to him.
That kind of player to me is the exact person this award was built for, right? Like that makes a lot more sense to me.
Let's move on.
Yeah.
Let's just leave it open to interpretation. Let's do this in terms of some black box theater that you don't know what actually is going to come next. WTA comeback player of the... Let's do these in pairs actually and whistle through it before we get to the big one in terms of player of the season. So the WTA comeback player of the season listed as, on my regard, is Caroline Garcia, Yelena Ostapenko, and Kaya Kanepi. And the ATP comeback player of the season is a big long list here, Dev. And I kind of like it because it gives them some flavor here to pick from. Borna Coric, Marin Cilic, Nick Kyrgios, Dominic Thiem, and Stan Wawrinka. Let's start on the WTA side first. Where are you going and what's the reason? And also a third question, did I miss anyone?
I guess the other thing is like coming back from what has to be kind of like signified, like coming back from not playing well or coming back from being bad is kind of the parameters here. I kind of want to pick Caroline Garcia though, because when you have a whole Wikipedia page and then one of the subheadings is loss of form out of top 70, you got an idea that somebody has had kind of a rough go of things. But to turn it around from that in 2021 and obviously dealing with the pandemic like everyone else was, but also that just throwing a complete wrench into all of your plans. Not only does she come back in 2022 and play well, she plays insane tennis. Maybe my favorite player to watch as well, Simon, from August onwards, or sorry, before that, probably June or July onwards. WTA Finals champion, US Open semifinal, world number 4. She beat all of the players that everyone else loved to talk about, including Iga Swiatek in Poland. I mean, what a season for her.
Amazing season. She was where I was leaning as well, with the greatest respect to the other two. And I think Yelena Ostapenko had a banner year as well, despite being Yelena Ostapenko and all the things that go on around her. Big fan, by the way, and I think this podcast is a big fan of her. We stan the Ostapenko fan group. Anyway, everything that you said about Caroline Garcia adds up to me. I still think she has a tiny bit left in her game. I really do. It's funny, right? You said one of the Wikipedia sub-article headings was loss of form. Is there any more like backhanded putting down
she
of
sucks
someone?
Now. They should have just called it she sucks now or bad things happen.
So yeah, Adeline Garcia as well. Where are you on the ATP side? Which of those 5 do you like the most?
I should note I added Dominic Thiem to this, Bush. You didn't have him initially, and I understand why. Like I think this is a process, and he's not winning stuff necessarily. But I want to pick Dominic Thiem. I think Coric is a good shout. He came back in an extremely good way, and you saw how good he could be, especially on hard courts in the summer swing and towards the end of the season. But Dominic Thiem, I feel like he's reworking more than just his game. This feels like a big task for him to find himself and will himself back to the spot he was in this game. And that spot was one of the best players in the world and someone that was appointment viewing because of the way he played. So in the sense of seeing him sort of realize his old abilities and find his groove again, I'm going to pick Dommy.
Yeah, I understand that, but the winner of this category is Bonachurch.
It has to be. I think he will win that. He will win that.
He has to, right? I love that Nick Kyrgios. Did you see that in the notes that I put Nick Kyrgios question mark? Like,
so
what?
he officially then? He was officially one of the nominees.
Oh, he was? I did not know that. For the purposes of this, sure. Let's go with that. And let's also say that he's not going to win it. So fair enough. Let's move on to the player of the season, the big ones. Let's round out with the WTA because I think that's an easy one to do, but it also gives us an opportunity to crow about a particular player. So let's go on the ATP. It's actually not... If you spin this one in a certain way, it's not cut in stone, no. So obviously the three that have been highlighted here is Alcaraz, Nadal, and Djokovic. And I think the award probably will go to Carlos Alcaraz. And I think it probably should go to Carlos Alcaraz. I think I might give this to Rafael Nadal, like on the Open Era Award. To do what he did this season, to win 2 Grand Slams and to basically... His body is so broken. The man is a walking husk of a human being. And to come back to do what he did... I think I'm going to give it to Nadal. I think I have to here.
I think I'm going to do the same, honestly. And as much as I wanted to pick Carlos Alcaraz and you win the US Open and you get to world number 1, like these are titanic achievements.
He's 18.
He's a kid still. Like, these are massive, massive achievements. But I have a hard time forgetting what Rafa did at the beginning of the season. Like, he was DOA several times. He was DOA in Australia. He was DOA in Paris. He just finds a way. And I think the 2 slams, obviously, maybe we have some qualms with the weighting of things, and slams obviously driving the majority of the conversation and the majority of the plaudits and the biggest headlines. But how could you not look at Rafa's season and go, what? He did what? He has how many slams now? Obvious. There's some Novak play in there. He was in Australia, and Novak having maybe the weirdest season of all time amongst active players. I'm going to pick Rafa as well.
I love it. It feels harsh to Carlos Alcaraz that he comes away from our on the court awards segment without any trophies or any.
Feels wrong. It feels like we got this horribly wrong, Simon.
I'm giving it to Rafa. Screw it. Let's go to the WTA Player of the Season.
Well, this one.
The shortlist is actually quite fascinating. To get to 3 is really, I think. Maybe I'll say this. I think the winner is Iga Swiatek, and we'll come on to that in a second. But I think the second player on that is Ons Jabeur to get to 2 finals to get to world number 2. I think who is on the shortlist from 3, 4, and 5 is probably a more fascinating conversation of what this season looks like on the WTA perspective, because there's some people that have had excellent seasons, and to try and limit that to 3 or figure out who that third player is from the season, I think is very, very challenging.
I mean, Jess Pegula should be in there, shouldn't she? That conversation, if we're talking about the next people.
Look, you're not getting an ownership stake in the Bills. It's not happening.
Come on. I just do want to take this time to outline how ridiculous Iga was. And I found the interview her coach did the other day. Bush, I don't know if you saw some of the quotes.
I didn't. No, please.
This is Tomasz Witorowski. Apologies for the pronunciation. Just talking about the season and really matter-of-factly talking about the season. And some of the best quotes basically saying like she lost twice this year to people playing better than her. Other than that, it was her own mistakes that caused her problems. But this kind of insight, and also just seeing the way Iga carries herself, obviously, we're huge fans. But I highly recommend checking out this tweet. We retweeted it on the Open Era feed. It's Dominic Sankowski has the thread. But, quote, I expected Iga to reach such results. I didn't know if it would be with me or the next coach. A year ago, I hardly knew Iga personally. It's weird that we passed each other, but that's how it turned. So basically, they ran into each other and became coach-player relationship, and it worked out pretty well.
I think that's my hope as well for a top 20 WTA or ATP player as well. Is that I'm just hitting next to them on a court one day and they decide that I'm going to become a coach. I like your game, man.
I like your game, Bush. Somehow he knows your name already. He's been scouting you.
Exactly. Yeah. He's got such a good brain as well. The way you think about the sport, you have to be my coach. It has to work like that. She deserves her own episode in her own right. We can do that before the end of the season because I think she deserves it. And to try and list off all the plaudits we can say about her and the things that have happened for her season is going to be too difficult in this tiny fragment of time that we have here, but in general, we will get to her and we will give her her due because it's been a remarkable season and she is a worthy winner of the WTA Player of the Season. Devang, we did it. We got through all the encore awards.
Now we get to the fun stuff.
Yeah, indeed. After the break, it is the Parting Shots Award. I don't know in what direction this is going to go or how this is going to be in general, but...
Get the lawyers on the phone. Get the libel experts on the phone as we dive into this.
How many ways can I tiptoe around saying that I believe that drugs exist in tennis and performance? Anyway, let's move on. The Open Era Golden Racket, the prestigious first time it's been handed out for our own personal favorite moments. Who's going to win that? You will find out after the break. Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. It's the Parting Shots Awards time, Dev. We always close every episode with part 3 being Parting Shots, and we only figured it was respectful to that as a genre that we choose our Parting Shots Awards for the year, beginning in a way that I think you'll enjoy. The ATP WTF Player of the Year. We've gone through Player of the Year, and now it's the WTF Player of the Year. These are players that you cannot understand their seasons at all, and you wish to give them some love in this capacity. And the only reason I'm doing that is because the first player on the list is Casper Ruud. The second player is Denis Shapovalov, and the third is Dani Medvedev. Which of these players do you look at and just think, WTF, mate?
I laugh at Casper Ruud's inclusion here because he's just so unjustified and clearly part of your political bent against him and your campaign against Casper Ruud. So I do not back this, Simon, and I'll stand up to you here. I'm really torn. I want to pick Dani Medvedev a lot. I feel like he had one of the stranger seasons. Like if he wins Australia, what happens? Like what is the new course? What is the alternate timeline, Bush? Like I feel like he might win another one or he might have 2 slams. But he gets banned and he has a kid and he plays kind of badly towards the end of the season, really badly to be uncharitable. But I'm going to pick Shapo, Bush, because he's fascinating to me. I still maintain I like watching him play the most, maybe of the Canadian crew, as much as I admire Felix and enjoy watching him as well. I truly, I'm just astonished every time I watch Shapo for good and bad reasons sometimes. And I don't think this was a good year really, but the way he ended it with the Davis Cup success and being someone the team could rely on and also getting back into that fold and signing up for it. He's just a very fascinating person to me. Like, I don't know if we've reached the ceiling. Maybe we have with him, but I'm curious if there's just a bit more to unlock.
It's a really difficult one. And to put into words, it's been an absolutely awful season. It's been a stinker of a season across the board. And one of the most surprising things perhaps is the Jens the Year award number 18. I think if you were circling that, just given the year and everything that's been said about him, you would have thought he was ranked in the top 50 or maybe 50 in the world as opposed to inside of the top 20. And I think it's testament to the fact that he does have so much talent and the way maybe perhaps the ranking points have broken this year for him as well, that he manages to maintain a place in the top 20 despite being dumped out in the first round of 7 consecutive tournaments, which is, I'm just checking the notes here. Yeah, that's not good. That's not a good look for someone who's been ranked 10th in the world. I think he's a worthy recipient of the WTF award in terms of the ATP side. Is there anyone else that you wanted to give any love to in this section before we move on?
Oh, I bet there is. I'm just running through the list. I mean, Novak should have been nominated, right? Like I
think he has to be, yeah.
Steph should have been nominated, probably. Steph, I forget the off-court stuff. Forget what maybe I have seen someone at the top of the game with so many defective shots or so many defective parts of their game that they're subsisting with these things dragging them down, and yet they're still at this level. I mean, Andrei Rublev, based on another tumultuous campaign, but also some really big successes, and also seeing him deal with his emotions in such a public way on the court. There's some other guys here.
Jensen Brooksby didn't make this list, but he could have done as well, just given some of the exploits that have happened with JT Brooksby during the course of this season. Let's move on to the WTA WTF Player of the Year, patent pending. Copyright Open Era. three players that made this list are Emma Raducanu, Naomi Osaka, and Bianca Andreescu. Which way are you going on this?
This is tough.
This is really difficult.
I think I mean Emma Raducanu's had 4,000 coaches and she's been on the tour how long? That being said, it's Naomi Osaka Bush. And I don't see this gleefully. I think we're all hoping she regains form or also regains her love or passion for the game, because I think that's in question as well. It's not lining up. Nothing is lining up to see her stay on the tour much longer, to me. And that is a WTF in a negative way. So I will pick her.
I think in our preview episode for the coming season, whether or not, if we asked you the question, does Naomi Osaka retire in 2023? I think the answer is probably yes, is it not?
Well, retire. I mean, retire in the Ash Barty sense, where she leaves and will eventually come back. Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Like a Kim Clijsters-esque for four comebacks.
And once again, all the power to her. Like I totally understand not being comfortable or not feeling your profession or wanting to switch up things in your life. Like I back that entirely. But tennis-wise, it just doesn't seem conducive, right? Like it doesn't seem like any of us are confident that Naomi is going to be all in for next year.
There does seem to be something very healthy about trying to take a year sabbatical from the grind of the tour if you've been doing it since you're 11 years old. If you can try and get 2 of them in your 20s, it does seem like a right way to go about doing it to try and preserve your body, especially if you're not like trying to hit 90 Grand Slams or whatever the stupid record is on the WTA side. If you're just out there to try and, win the tournaments that you're in, you're not competing against history, you're just competing to make sure that you enjoy it and love the sport, more power to you. Take the time off. Absolutely.
Well said, sir.
Biggest beef, also known as the award with the most angst, possibly. We could go in that direction, but we'll leave it as biggest beef for the time being. And Naomi Osaka makes another appearance on this, and it's Naomi Osaka versus Martina Navratilova. Also on this list and nominated is Stefanos Tsitsipas versus the entire ATP Tour, the Novak Hive versus Twitter, and I see that you've included the US Davis Cup team here, which is very funny. So which direction are you going to go in terms of where you're going to award this year?
I do just want to mention the US Davis Cup team for a couple of reasons. Marty Fish and Andy Roddick saying that Canada shouldn't have won, or Canada deserves an asterisk for winning the Davis Cup because they were knocked out initially, and the only reason they got it is because Russia and Belarus were banned. Whatever, guys. Also, no one was playing in that qualifier against the Netherlands, so the top guys, so relax. What I do love is the fact that Rajiv Ram, who was the best player in the world in doubles, at least in 2022, was overlooked for selection by said Marty Fish. And wouldn't you know it, Bush, they lost Italy in doubles. And then we saw these guys go into social media and act just hilariously turned. I remember the beginning of this week starting with people calling Francis Tiafoe disrespectful for wearing his headphones during the U.S. national anthem during that Davis Cup tie. This is how they ended it, from stupidity for calling out Francis for a nothing moment to infighting and destroying your own team from the inside. Well done, Marty Fish. But my real answer is probably going to be, and I say this riskily, Novak Hive versus everyone, especially during the Australia time, Bush. That was a scene, man. We had some real hilarious stuff happening in just ridiculous ways.
Good Lord, it was hilarious. I loved it. I think back to that time and just what was going on in our Discord server and just in general covering that. It was just the best time to be a tennis fan. And I know a lot could be written about how modern day versions of following a sport is more off the court or it's off the pitch or any of this sort of stuff rather than on it. And a lot more people are interested in the drama. If this is the kind of drama that you get in tennis, sign me up, baby. God damn, it was good. I enjoyed it anyway.
Cosign.
So you're going to give it to the USA?
No, I want to pick Novak Hive in general.
Okay.
I mean, I don't also support the idea of being a hive and being abusive and horrible on Twitter. Like, I don't like that at all. And I do want to pick the US Davis Cup team for being them and being mad. And Todd Woodbridge as well being mad that Canada won the Davis Cup. So maybe recency bias is leading me to pick the Davis Cup.
Imagine being a minority in the United States and being told that you don't respect your country enough. But like,
Jesus Christ, man. Also pick Rajiv Ram. Yo, Marty, he's the best doubles player in your damn country. What are you doing? What are you doing? You got Riley Opelka chirping Fernando Verdasco for being suspended for ADHD, saying this is the tip of the iceberg. This is, I don't know. The US men, get it together.
I love it. I love it. Let's move on. Biggest tearjerker. 3 retirements for you to pick from. Let's do this in quantity of tears. Millimeters shed, perhaps.
Yeah. I'm glad I had a beaker out while this was all happening as well, Bush, so I could drain them into a measuring
test tube
device.
in front of you. Yeah, exactly.
I carry one with me at all times, so for moments like this.
So the 3 retirements. Roger Federer's retirement. Serena Williams' quote unquote retirement. Sorry, not retirement. Conscious uncoupling. And then the retirement of Juan Martín del Potro. Which did you shed the biggest tears for?
I'm a Mark, and I'm a Fed guy. So the Federer retirement, forget like the random songs and the weird pageantry of it all, which I thought was also upsetting, but for different reasons. I cried a ton when it ended, and when Rafa and him didn't win that match. Like that fazed me, Bush, for quite a while. I'm still fazed by it, I think.
Still shook, as they say. Still shook from that moment.
For sure.
I think those 3 retirements carried their own differing levels of emotions as well. And I think that's testament to obviously what the personalities themselves were like on court and how it was presented and what the sort of event and the pageantry that was around it. I didn't find the Serena, and I know there was tears in the crowd and everything, but it just seemed a bit more practiced and a bit more stage managed. And in a certain way, it lacked a little bit of emotion, I guess, in that regard. And maybe it's just because of the fact that both Delpo and Federer were blubbering on court. Maybe that added some of the weight to it. But the Serena Williams, I don't know, strange lack of emotion, I guess. Strange lack of deep crying, I guess.
I will say like it was a bit of a tour, this Serena retirement thing. So like in Toronto, I felt like it was a bit more natural maybe, or like less manufactured. But by the time we got to New York and Gail King on court and then playing that video, the tribute video, like every day, 2 times, it got to the point where like, okay, like really guys? So I think it was just the sheer amount of tributes that kind of changed how Serena's departure was looked at. That being said, like the Tomljanovic match and like the emotions around that, I won't forget that for a very long time.
We have arrived, Devang, the big one, the granddaddy of them all, the Open Era Golden Racket. Oof. It is our Open Era favorite moment of the year. God, too many Open Eras in there. Apologies for that. But our own personal favorite moments. These can be from anything, on the court, off the court. But when you think back to 2022, is there a moment that sticks with you on a personal level, on an emotional, visceral level that will stay with you for a very long time? And where is your award going to for the Open Era Golden Racket?
Very tough, a lot of pressure. This being the first Golden Racket that I'm handing out. It's going to go to Sinner Alcaraz in New York, Bush. The Epic. 2 players we've talked about a ton on this show, and deservedly so. And Jannik Sinner, someone that we like a lot and we think is destined for really great things. But to see the future today and also see, I don't want to use the word changing of the guard because I think it's obviously cliche and it's used too often sometimes, but it really did feel like a bit of my childhood was ending and a bit of my tennis viewing of the past and my 20s was ending, and all of the people that I grew up and loved and watched and was glued to the results every week. It felt like this new generation was truly ushered in by an epic match that only a handful of people were still awake to see on the Eastern Coast. I feel like that was a purely tennis moment, and it was felt a bit insular, but also massive and impactful beyond tennis Twitter or tennis people who watch every tournament. This made a mark, and it'll be one of those matches that people remember for positive reasons, and it helps that Carlos ended up winning the tournament. But I think the Sinner Alcaraz match for me was a reason to hope and a reason to be optimistic that sure, Fed's gone and Nadal will be gone and Novak will be gone, but they'll be fine. The tour will be fine because these guys exist.
There's something very wonderfully 2022 in tennis about watching or tennis basically saying, we are going to murder these two children, and it's going to be at 3 a.m. in the morning. That's modern day tennis.
I do love people as well being like, do tennis fans realize that this isn't good if a match ends at 3 a.m.? We're like, yeah, we get it, man.
Shockingly enough, maybe it's not the best thing for the sport when you have your world number one, a top 5 player playing at 3 a.m. Yes. We very much know this. That's a great shout for Golden Racket. And I think we may look back at that match in a couple of years' time and think about the start and maybe the very early stages of a very, very, very good rivalry. I'm really, really excited to see what both of them follow up with in 2023. Can I give you my Golden Racket?
Please. I'm very curious to see where you go.
Yeah, I mean, it comes from the Laver Cup, and I think it's somewhat of a shock to everyone who knows this podcast. And I mean, it goes to Ellie Goulding. How can it not, right?
Oh, you got me. No.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Unbelievable.
No. If I was actually good and had written this joke more, I'd try and do another stage of this. And it was Jack Sock's passing shot. No, it was... it was the retirement, but it was that photo. I think that photo of both of them just losing it on court. I think if I look back at 2022, Novak will stand out for what happened in Australia. And I think I could look at it emotionally and say just being effectively shit posting in our Discord was very, very, made me very happy. It was a very fun time. But I think that image is burnt into my mind of Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. And I think there's a lot of things to be said, and I think we try to sum that up on the podcast, but a demonstration of positive masculinity against the backdrop of some pretty horrendous stuff that we've seen during the course of this year.
Underrated.
It's nice every once in a while
underrated
to see
aspect.
that. Yeah, I think so. I think so, and it may sound sappy, but periodically you got to get your win somewhere, and I think that's what stands out to me, and I'm happy to give it the Golden Racket.
I mean, they keep asking Rafa about this, which I find a bit hilarious as well. Yeah, he's clearly trying to move on. He's got kids now. He's like, guys, I'm okay. Like, I'll be all right. But he did say a part of himself died at that moment. And I think there was a translation thing there as well. But same here, man. Same here.
They keep asking him in a way that implies that Roger is now dead.
Dead, yeah. Like, Roger? He's gone. Like, permanently gone. He's gone.
So funny. Let's go to 2 challenges remaining. We did it. We got through the award ceremony. Thank you for listening through to the end on that. It was a whopper of a year. Tons of stuff happened. So we tried our best to round it up for you.
And before we do that, Simon, the Iga Swiatek season overall it'll be looked at with more astonishment as we get farther removed from it, I think. People will look back on the season and be like, holy cow, this woman was dominant. She asserted her claim to being the best tennis player on the earth, and it was a marvel to watch. So I would do an honorable mention for Iga.
Enjoy your moment, Iga. Brenda Fruhvirtova is coming for that Roland Garros title. It's coming, damn it. And all the money that's going on it from my bank account. No, I'm kidding. Let's go to 2 challenges remaining for this awards special. Dev, would you like me to go first, or do you have something burning at the back of your brain that you want to talk about?
No, I'll let you go.
So, as mentioned last week in the intro to the podcast, I had the chance to visit the wonderful city of Paris and was really astonished because it's been a couple of years since I managed to visit Paris. I think that 2019 was the last time, so pre-pandemic. And just seeing some of the work that's been done from an urban standpoint and city planning perspective. Obviously, the increase in bike lanes is probably the headline that most people know about it, but just the overall drop in vehicle traffic and it being much more of a friendly place to just walk around and be around. I think Paris has somewhat of a bad rap in general because most people look at it, as a city of love and city of lights and all this sort of stuff, and you get there and it's massively disappointing. I've been impressed this time, and I think that's the best possible thing I can say about my visit to Paris, is that it's not bad anymore. It's actually a very, very nice city and seems very livable.
Love that. I mean, I want to go to Paris again because I feel like I would experience it differently than I did in 2019, and the weather played a role in that as well. But that's great to hear. I was struggling. I was kind of going two ways about this in terms of my pick, but I will say Canada being in the World Cup and being able to cover it on a station I grew up listening to and literally fell asleep every night listening to it. Being able to be on the air and talk about soccer there was pretty surreal. And I'm quite gutted that it ended so quickly. And that's just the way World Cups work, and we'll be back. But it was a bit of a whirlwind, but also really exhilarating and quite fun. So I'm really happy it happened.
I think I'm just like so stoked for you. And I think we can say that on the podcast that we're 5 years removed from working together and starting podcasting together, and just to see the journey that you've been on to achieve that, I think it's so wonderful. I'm just like so genuinely happy and stoked for you. So it's cool to see that you've been able to do that.
Love you, sir. Thank you so much for those words. And thank you for listening to Open Era. We mentioned that Discord a few times on this show, and rightfully so, because I don't know where we would be, Bush, through 2022 without the Discord to talk about everything that's happened this year and talk about other stuff as well. We've got so many great people. We've had so many of them on our show to talk about tennis or do our draws or our picks for the Grand Slams. So incredibly fun. And I really, really do want to say these people are wonderful. And if you want to join them, head on over to patreon.com/Open Era to get the show ad free, get it early on Sundays. Plus, you join that Discord where we're talking tennis all the time. I want to give them more time, Bush, but really, this Discord, this crew of people, it's a special bunch.
It really is. I've had such a blast this year. They all know their tennis. They all love a good shit post, which is exactly what you want in a Discord.
The key.
They're also just all wonderful people as well, which is exactly the way that you want to spend time in a Discord server. So yeah, I think we can't wax lyrical enough about it, to be honest.
Amazing people. As for us, we're wherever you find your podcasts. So if you could be so kind and give us a review or a rating, that would be wonderful as we try to get this pod into more people's ears. I think we're still formulating what exactly 2023 will look like, but we will return in some form. So don't worry. And we have a bunch more year-end stuff to get through, Bush, as we close out this season. There'll be more coming from us, is all I'm saying, in 2022. But we'll leave it there as I begin to ramble. For producer Dylan on the ones and twos, and for Greg as well, and throughout the whole year, massive shouts to these guys for joining us on Sundays and at terrible hours as well on Sundays. Can't say enough how much we appreciate what they do on the back end to get this pod out and sounding so good. So legends all around. Dill and Greg, thank you so much. And for Simon, sir, another year in the books. Thank you for the journey.
Absolutely. Let's do it all again in 2023 in some form or another.
In
Come this far, let's keep going, damn it.
That's a tease, baby. That's a tease. All right. Thank you so much for listening to Open Era. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll talk to you soon.